We're here with Jeff Goodman from Halstead Real Estate here in Manhattan, dear old friend, and also a co-podcaster. So, Jeff.
Well, the inspiration came from you, Vince. You've been doing it 5 years longer than me, and you've set an example.
Yeah, but what I want to do is talk about the difference that yours provides. And just on a break here, you were telling me how successful it is, and that's a good thing in a very short period of time. So tell us what inspired you to come up with a podcast that explained the history and the background of all the neighborhoods that we play in New York City versus just your typical sit-down chat, fest and whatever else.
Well, the radio show and the podcast came 5 years after a different event that I have, which is the same content, which is I sponsor local historic walking tours. And about 5 years after that, I was invited to do a show to extend the content that I had with people I knew live on the streets of the city to the airwaves. And once a week, we visit a particular neighborhood, for the most part. And I do two things. One, I explore the history of the neighborhood with the first guest. It's an interview show. I don't do most of the talking. I ask the questions. And the second part is usually with a local business owner, an artist, a nonprofit person who can speak more recently about the vibe of the neighborhood, how it's changed, what they like about it, what makes that New York neighborhood special. So I try to create as much of an understanding, but also a feeling with this medium of the feel and the vibe of a neighborhood as I possibly can. And sometimes I do special things, like I had a show about Flushing this past week, and my second guest was with an architect who actually is designing the biggest development in Flushing. So to have her perspective of how she's seen the neighborhood change and how it's going to be impacted by her work as a creative architect was really something great.
I haven't listened to that one yet. It's fairly brand new, but one of the things that attracts me to the podcast is, as a New Yorker for 100 years, and also now playing in real estate for 17 of those 100 years, you think you know everything, and you think you know all the neighborhoods, and sometimes I'm listening and I think, oh, that's really cool. I didn't know that about wherever you are. That to me, sort of stands out, because as real estate agents, just as a New Yorker, you want to be able to help educate your listeners and your clients when we're taking them around in a real estate showing situation, because you now know more about the neighborhood than not, and the historical aspects that you bring up are amazing.
Thank you.
I know it takes a village. Tell us how.
People like to have a context behind a place, and you can be a really good agent, but if you can give people a context that you have an understanding of the neighborhood, it's fun to tell stories about the history, but also if you have enough of a feel of a neighborhood to take people into the neighborhood and have them feel it the way you feel it, it's much different from just looking at particular boxes. But I also have to say that since my show is an interview show, and I don't do most of the talking, every show I have learned things about neighborhoods that I didn't know. I learned something about its history, and I also become more acquainted with a particular color or vibe of the neighborhood, especially its recent changes, through people who do business there, through people who run nonprofits there, through people who are artists there, maybe they're historic grassroots organizations. And I think that mix provides a really good feeling of what a neighborhood is like, what the essence of a neighborhood is like. Because when people buy a place to live, they don't just live in that box. They have a lifestyle in a neighborhood. And New York has amazing neighborhoods. We really do.
They absolutely do. So to wrap this up, tell us where we can find, name of the show and where we can find it.
The show is called Rediscovering New York with Jeff Goodman. You can find it on talkradio.nyc. It's live on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. And it's also on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher.
All your podcast apps that you can come up with.
Yes, exactly.
Very good.
Thanks to you for being an inspiration to me in this, Vince, and also for helping me get started in this venture when we got together. And you gave me all of the advice and all of your perspective.
Great company. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.